We are here. Amy Miller is here. New York City, right?
Right, New York City.
I have, as it turns out, I have never in my life actually been to New York City.
Oh,
Is it,
wow.
is it, now I had a thing years ago where I was driving from Boston to DC. And so you could kind of see the skyline and everything from the highway. But
That's
I've
the
always,
best part. You got it right there.
but I've always wanted, is New York like really everything people make it out to be?
Is New York everything people make it out to be? For me, I've always felt like when I first decided I wanted to move to New York City, some of my friends discouraged me and they'd say things like, why don't you just move to DC or Boston because their thought of New York is that it's just super overwhelming. So I don't know if that's part of what you mean by is New York everything that people make it out to me to be. To me, I've always felt like, you're just in one small piece of New York City at a time. So I find it comforting. I
Mhm.
never have found it to be overwhelming.
Hmm. That's a because for it always sort of feels like, are you originally, so you're not originally from New York City?
No, but I have New York City in my genes. So my mom's parents, my nana and grandpa, grew up in the Bronx, and they moved down to Virginia, Southern Virginia, so a couple hours south of DC when they were in their very early 20s when they first got married. So my mom and aunts and uncles were all born in Virginia. And then I have some aunts and uncles and cousins in and around New York, but I've always wanted to live here since I was little. So
Yeah, because it always seems interesting because it seems like for the people who live in New York City that it's like the center of the universe. And they always tell all of us who have never been there or and never lived there that, oh, you don't know what you're missing and it's just the greatest city in the world. And I never disbelieve them. I never once thought they were wrong, but I've always, wondered, is it really, does it really have that feeling like there's just the city that never sleeps, as they always call it?
yeah. Well, I think the main feeling that the city has is energy. So whenever I leave and come back to the city, whether I'm taking the train or flying, when I get closer to the city and when I land or arrive, I feel the energy. So I think
Mhm.
it's feeding off of all of the energy of the people in the city. So there's a lot of energy here, and it also requires a lot of energy to live here. Everything is an effort, going to the grocery store, carrying groceries. It's a lot of walking. It's exhausting. So it requires a lot of energy, and I have a ton of energy. So it's a place where I can use up all of my energy. I've never done well in the suburbs. I tend to lose my motivation and energy when I leave the city. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. That's why people come. Although, and I don't think that's necessarily going to change too much. I think New York City will always be New York City, but right now a lot of people are working from home and that kind of thing, and not maybe getting out and exploring as much as before. But I think
Mhm.
that'll come back.
Well, it's interesting to see you have a lot of energy because I sort of feel like you need it. When I just look at what it is you do, writer, speaker, life coach, all these titles that you have to, I'm assuming that that does take a lot of energy. What was sort of the genesis of you getting to where you are now and what it is that you do?
Which aspect?
I'll
You're right. I
let
do a lot of things.
I'll let you pick. Just yeah,
Okay.
take us on the journey.
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey, which I think is going to be another book, not too far off. But it took me a long time to finally get started on my path. I really struggled a lot in college. I used to be a very unhappy person since I was little girl, high school, college. So during and after college, I struggled for a long time to finally get my career started. I felt like very lost and was always searching. And I did finally get my start in sales. Like we talked about, I have a lot of energy. I don't like to be, sitting behind a desk too much. So outside sales was a good start for me. So I started there, and then I got into medical sales, and then I've always paid really close attention to when something is bothering me, and because it's an indicator that change is needed. So, each time I look back over my life when I made a pivotal move that really changed the course of my life moving forward, it was always because something was bothering me and didn't feel right. So I got to a point when I was doing medical sales where I had that feeling again. And that's when I ended up transitioning into recruiting. So I recruit for medical sales, and I've been, or for the medical manufacturing industry. So I've been doing this now for, this is my 7th year. And I've always been writing, always been creative as well. I've tried a lot of different creative avenues too. I did stand-up comedy. I think that's how we're connected I think that's how we got connected on Instagram, but always been writing. And how I got my idea to write this book, Ready, Set, Recruit, that I'm coming out with. One of my clients asked me to come in-house and recruit for their in-house team. And I did give it a lot of consideration. I really appreciated the opportunity, but I like a lot of freedom. So ultimately that wasn't for me. But I decided, or that got my wheels turning, and I was thinking about, okay, how can I continue to partner with them and help them once they do go to an in-house team? So then I thought about maybe I could do consulting and help advise them through their recruiting process. And also, I do notice a lot of unnecessary inefficiencies throughout the recruiting process. And I guess I was finding myself getting frustrated. And so I paid closer attention to that, frustration. And I thought, why don't I write a book? And that can also help me give me some clout, to start my consulting, because I'd like to transition my recruiting career to consulting. So yeah, I've always been writing, but this is a writer, but this is the first time I've kind of brought the two together, my job career and my creative writing side. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was kind of long-winded answer to your question.
Hey, that's okay. When you say a lot of, I guess I'm interested in the entire recruiting process, as you say. And is that kind of like what somebody like me, the layperson, would think, that it's just involving finding qualified applicants or qualified, I should say, workers that fit certain positions within an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. That is exactly what it is. So it's headhunting, recruiting, same thing. So it requires, first, it's important to have a solid understanding of what the client wants and understand their culture, as much about the organization as you can. And then with the more insight I have, the better job I can do. And so that's the fun part, is building that relationship with hiring managers and helping them to grow their teams and really partnering with them. The not fun part is staring at LinkedIn all day, but that's a lot of what it takes. Searching. And then, interviewing folks and uncovering, what they're looking for and if it's a good fit, and then helping coach them throughout the process and continuing to partner with both the candidate and the manager throughout the process. And then if you do a good job, then you get more business. So that is what has happened for me. It's very busy.
Mm-hmm. I find it just absolutely fascinating when you say that you saw a lot of inefficiencies in the way recruiting was done. What do you mean by that?
One example would be, so I do recruit for a lot of medical sales positions, for example, and, hiring managers are super busy. They're going a million miles an hour in 18 different directions. So they don't always give you all of the details. I don't think that they realize how important all of the details at the start can be, and in taking time on the front end of the recruiting process to really establish what they're looking for, and then take some time with the recruiter to communicate that so that everybody's aligned. That can make the process smooth and efficient. So one example would be, we're hiring for Manhattan associate sales rep. And then later on in the process, when we've got candidates going to the final interview, I find out that the territory also includes Albany. So that's going to knock a lot of people out of the process that have already had 3 interviews, and we've wasted a lot of people's time, including the hiring managers. So that would be one example. And then also maybe not clearly aligning or setting candidates up for success by saying, hey, this is what we're looking for in this next step of the process. I'm moving you forward. This is how you can best prepare for this interview. When candidates don't have the information they need to best prepare, they may not best prepare. And then we're starting from scratch again. So those are just a couple of examples.
Okay. As you're speaking right now, and people who are going to listen to this podcast are going to hear you. Do you have, I guess, in your experience and having been doing this, do you have some, I guess, tips, suggestions for people who are going to be going through the interview process? Because everybody has had to interview for a job. And rarely in my life do I find something, at least for me anyway, more nerve-wracking. Especially because you're in that position where you don't personally know the people who are interviewing you. You know what I mean? So you don't know their sense of humor. You don't know, what vibes with them, what doesn't. And so you're trying to like sort of be the best version of yourself that you can, because obviously you're sitting in for an interview because you need a job. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So in your experience, do you have some good pointers you could give to people?
Absolutely. And there's some of that in the book too. And then I'm also going to write another book geared toward candidates to help them with that piece too. I think one element that's crucial for both candidates and for managers is to be able to tell your story, which brief and specific, which is, this is who I am, this is where I've been, and this is where I'm looking to go, or what I'm looking to do. Because if you can't articulate what it is you've done and where you want to go, nobody can help you get where you want to go. We won't be able to figure out if it's a good fit. So if a candidate has challenges articulating their story, I think it would be really helpful for them to practice it, before going into the interview. Just, practice verbally out loud, sharing your story, because you should be able to share that, this is where I've been, what I'm doing now, where I'm looking to go within 3 to 5 minutes in an interview. If a candidate has challenges doing that and they kind of end up going on a tangent and it takes them 15 minutes to share their story, well, half of the first interview is eaten up. It's typically going to be a 30-minute phone interview. And then what happens is the manager doesn't come away with the information they need to determine whether they want them to move forward. So this candidate's already making an inefficient use of the manager's time, if that makes sense. So that's one tip.
I noticed you had mentioned that on one of your Instagram videos, exactly that's kind of like right off the bat, sort of a red flag to a manager. Excuse me. And what is it, as we were talking about red flags, what are some red flags that as a hiring manager, that kind of click in your head right away when you're dealing with applicants?
Candidates who don't answer the question directly. Somebody that is not comfortable sharing about themselves, either doesn't know what they want, or they know that they're not what the manager wants. And so they might be skirting around the question, not answering it directly. Like, for example, who are your target customers right now? Who do you call on and what are you selling? If it's a sales position, for example, that's a super basic question. And sometimes candidates have a challenge answering that. Well, they're already making my life much more, my job much more difficult, because if you can't tell me, hey, this is what I'm doing, I can't determine if you're a good fit. And I certainly can't relay that to the manager with confidence. So not being able to clearly, say, hey, this is what I do and this is what I want. That's a red flag. Let's see. Candidates that don't ask good questions. You can really tell a lot by a candidate by the types of questions that they ask. Questions should make sense and kind of flow in an order that makes sense. So like, you don't want to jump ahead with your questions, so first the candidate needs to understand the day in the life of the job so that they can determine if they're going to like it. So if they haven't yet established that and they move on to, well, what's the career progression look like within the company, or what is the training, or what are the benefits? Well, what difference does it make? We haven't established, you haven't yet established a good understanding of what the job is and if you like it. That's, so that would be another one.
How about flipping the table on that?
Okay.
In terms of red flags when you're interviewing for a job and the person interviewing you kind of can give off some signals that maybe this isn't the place I want to be.
Absolutely. Rushed, unorganized interviews. I do work, I have worked with and do work with a lot of established companies that have been around for years, and also companies that are more up and coming in certain divisions or the company as a whole. So I've worked with startup environments as well as established companies. And I've noticed rushed, unorganized interview processes in both. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be a startup. But I had, there's one hiring manager that I worked with in the past that would call candidates for a first interview from the subway in Manhattan. And so she's catching candidates off guard. They're mid-interview. They answer the phone. They're already in an interview, and then maybe the call gets dropped. There's a lot of distractions. So that could be a pretty good, how I talk about this in my book. I'm sure a lot of people, we've all heard this before, but how we do anything is how we do everything. So, everybody's style is their style, and it might work for them. But as a candidate, you want to pay attention to how the manager is leading the interview process, because that's a good indicator to what it's going to be like working with them. So if it feels good, during the interview process, great. But if it doesn't, then that's something that you want to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. The worst, the biggest red flag in the world, at least in my experience, is if you walk into an interview and their very first question is, when can you start? That's like the worst, because you're like, you are so desperate for staff, and there's a reason why. That was right, I joked about, we're not anymore, but my wife and I, we were both CNAs. And that was always like, you knew that right away whenever you went into a different clinic, or especially if you went into any kind of long-term care home, they had to sign up that they were hiring. And when you went in there with your applications, the first thing they said is, hey, what shift and when can you start? You turned around and left right away, because that was just, no. That was always the, it's been years now, but a long time ago, I was in charge of hiring for a company that I worked for. And it was the nature of the business was one of those where you primarily dealt with people who were high schoolers or just out of high school, who may be looking for a first job or just a second job. And that was always the roughest thing about the job, at least for me anyway, is that trying to sit down with somebody and determine, because everybody's going to put on their best face when they're giving an interview. And, you could never in a million years blame somebody for doing that. They want a job, so of course they're going to do everything they can. But every single time as a company, every single time you hire somebody, you're taking a risk. There's a risk involved there, and so what if somebody just gives the greatest interview in the world, and then when you say, oh, wow, I think this person's going to be fantastic, and then they actually show up for work and they're absolutely terrible, they're toxic or they're lazy. Trying to determine that from an interview is really, really difficult, probably because I wasn't trained or well practiced at it. I was just, from my company, was told, hey, here's a list of applicants, call them interviewing them. I'm like, I've never done an interview before. How am I going to interview somebody? I probably wish I would have had your book back then.
Because absolutely.
The pardon me, the other side that I thought was really interesting in your list of attributes here was life coach. Which is something that I find absolutely fascinating. The what kind of aspect or angle do you take towards that?
Let's see. I don't know if I understand your, like, how do I go about it? Like, what is my approach? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it feels like in my life I've met a few life coaches, and it was always interesting to me how, you have some, and I don't mean to be rude to electricians, but when you have an electrician, like an electrician's an electrician, they have these tools and this is what they do. Every life coach I've met have always been such different flavors and personalities, and every single one of them has been great. And so the reason why you don't understand my question is because I don't know how to ask it.
I understand what you're saying.
Because basically what I'm saying is that I guess for you personally, what is it that you like about that, and what is it that you like to bring to it?
Yeah. So, well, I'll start, if it's okay, by sharing how I decided I want to go into that. So, I really struggled a lot growing up, from the time I was very little until well into my 30s. Pretty unhappy a lot of my life. I think outwardly nobody would have known that. I was successful, continuing to better myself, but I just never felt good. There was always this underlying unhappiness that followed me around. And so I was on a constant quest my entire life to feel better. And I'm really big on self-improvement. So I read lots of books. I saw different therapists. I did consult with a life coach, other spiritual leaders, but really what helped me finally get happy was identifying the real issue. So that was the problem. I hadn't uncovered the real problem as to why I was feeling the way that I was feeling. And once we identify a problem, then we can solve it, and not until then. And I talk about that in my book too, and how that relates to the recruiting process. But basically, if surface level challenges keep showing up in our life, it is to draw our attention to a deeper issue that needs healing. And so once I was finally able to identify, oh, this is the issue, and it was not easy, it was incredibly painful to identify it and then heal it and go through it. But it didn't take me long at all once I finally identified the issue. And I had spent a lifetime trying to feel better. And so you have a lifetime of pain, and then the big pain of actually identifying the issue and healing it, but then you feel better. So I felt like I feel like I can help others go through that, identify their challenge, and get happier much more quickly. So that's one thing that I want to be able to help people with. And then also, I've always been, this is one thing I've always had. I'm a big believer in myself. Whatever I set my mind to, I'm going to do it. And we don't all want the same things, but I think it's very important. We all want something, and we're the only ones that can really hold ourselves back. So when we can get out of our own way by either uncovering a challenge and then working through it, or really listening to ourselves and saying, hey, this is actually what I really want to do. I've just not been pursuing it. Also to inspire people that, hey, you can accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish. First, uncover what it is, and then just take the first step. So throughout my quest of trying to, get happy and feel better, I've learned a lot of practices that people can implement that can make the process so much easier. So that's why I'm doing it. And my approach is, first I ask questions, because we all have answers within ourselves, but the challenge is we don't always listen to ourselves. Listening to ourselves can be a hard thing, especially when we're unhappy or we're stressed. I see the problem, and so we can't see a solution. So I ask a lot of questions up front, and I can typically figure out what it is very quickly, what the challenge is, but I kind of let my clients come to that conclusion by drawing it out of them.
Mm-hmm. I think you're 100% right. I think we're in this situation where cognitively, the person wants comfort. The person wants to find a place of comfort, which isn't good bedfellows with growth sometimes. You know what I mean? And that's, I love the way you put it, because, the hardest thing in the world is to stand in front of the mirror naked. And I don't mean literally, because I think a lot of the times, and I know, and I like I said, I absolutely love the way you put it, because I've been there, where you're just like, you're really, really upset. Subconsciously, you know what's wrong. Maybe even more than subconsciously, you know what's wrong, but your body's attempting to bury it underneath the sand, because it's not something that either you want to face or you're ready to face. And but at the end of the day, you kind of have to, if you're ever going to move past whatever it is bothering you, and kind of move on and get yourself to a better place.
Absolutely. And I started to talk about this before, but each time in my life, looking back, when I made, a move toward something that was so much better, I was really, really unhappy about something, different levels of unhappiness. But like before I decided to move to New York, I'd wanted to live in New York my entire life since I was a little girl. I remember asking my mom when I was 8 years old if we could please move to New York. And of course she said, we'll see. That's what parents say. So decades later, I finally got here. But right before I made the decision to move, I was getting to be in a pretty dark place. I just felt, I had a job, I had my career started, but I was just unhappy. And I just felt like I wasn't connecting with anybody. So if I hadn't been squeezed, I talk about this a lot in my book and in my videos about how discomfort is a tool, because it's an indicator that we need change, and we don't often make that change until we get uncomfortable enough. A lot of times our problems will follow us around until they get so big that we can't ignore them. And then that's when we make a change.
Mm-hmm. And I absolutely love another one of your podcast videos. You had mentioned that you as a person have to be your own measure of success in your own eyes. And I think that we get so caught up in what we think we're supposed to do, if that makes sense. Like,
Absolutely makes sense.
you're supposed to go to this college, you're supposed to get this degree, you're supposed to buy this house, you're supposed to get this white picket fence, you're supposed to marry this kind of person, you're supposed to have 2.5 kids, you're supposed to have a 401k, you're supposed to. And the amount of people in my life that I've met who all along their path hit those check marks, and they're just miserable people. And I don't mean miserable outwards, just inwardly. You can tell they're not happy. They feel unfulfilled. They're constantly stressed. They're constantly, and you can tell it's because and I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and when you said this, it like put it so accurately, is that he felt like he was everything that everybody thought he should be. So why isn't he happy? Why does he feel depressed? And I don't mean clinically, because being depressed and being clinically depressed are two different things. And the way you put it was just absolutely right on point.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, some people, it can be hard to listen to ourselves and to give ourselves, I call it giving ourselves moments, moments that we feel like we really want to do this. We're being called to do this. I just feel like doing this, but maybe we don't do it because we feel like we should do something else. So an example would be, and I don't have kids, so, but still, like, for example, let's say a mom maybe has young kids and she really, really wants to go to yoga, and she keeps putting that off and never going to yoga because she feels like, she needs to always be home taking care of her kids. But the better we take care of ourselves and do what it is we're called to do, the better we can be to those around us. So your person that you were just talking about who's depressed, if they were happy, we project how we feel about ourselves onto those around us. So it's really not a selfish thing to pursue the things that are meaningful to us, that are calling us, that, I feel like doing this. It's really important to listen to that and do those things, because there's a reason that whatever that thing is calling to us. There's something that it's either something that's meant for us, or we're going to discover, a new path going in that direction. But then the happier we are, the better we are to those around us. But if we're not in that habit of listening to ourselves and what it is we truly want, we're not used to that. So it can be uncomfortable at first, making that change. Anything we're not used to doing can be uncomfortable. But I started that practice a long time ago. I feel like doing this, I'm going to do this. It was uncomfortable at first. Like I've worked from home now for several years, and so I have the flexibility. If I want to go do a workout class in the middle of the day, I can. But when I first started working from home and I gave myself that freedom to do that, I felt really guilty about it, but now it's just like, I do what I want when I want. I have set up my life so that it's like that. And I get all my work done with greater efficiency because I'm happy, because there's less of the mental mind clutter and stress going on.
Well, we sort of have that here in the United States, I guess. We still sort of have part of that ethos, right? That you get up, you work hard, you don't quit. And I'm not saying that there aren't good attributes to that, but I think that unfortunately sometimes some people get so caught up in that, again, because like we were saying, they feel like that's what they should be doing.
Yeah.
And then they can't figure out why they're so unfulfilled at the end of the day, and why they feel so empty. And so, if you had the ability to be the greatest violinist in the world, but you got a job working at a car factory because that's where your dad was and that's what you were supposed to do, and now you've been there for 20 years and you just come home every day tired at the end of the day and put your feet up and drink beer and watch sports and can't figure out why your life sucks. Well, that's that's probably partly why.
Absolutely. I encourage people to think of it like this. We succeed at what we focus on, and anybody can likely prove that to themselves just by looking at their life and where they are successful, and remind themselves that, okay, I succeeded here because that's where I focused my attention. So if, one of my clients, life coaching clients, is super successful in his business, but he's got all these other bigger goals that are calling to him. So he's a little bit unhappy because he feels buried in his work when he really wants to be focusing on these other things. So I talked to him about taking moments to dedicate your time toward what it is you really want, because we succeed at what we focus on. So if you keep just focusing on your business now, that's where you're going to be next year, the year after that, the year after that. If there's something else you want, you have to give it attention. And there's a reason that the idea, is coming to you. There's a reason that you want it. So.
Right. I mean, that's what you're saying. That's precisely why you and I are talking right now. That's precisely why I have a podcast, is because
That's awesome. I love it.
It was one of those things where and I started the podcast probably about, I don't know, 2.5, 3 years ago, something like that. And I have a job that's a paying gig. It pays extremely well. I'm really good at it. It is insanely boring. But, I have a house, I have a wife and kids, and, I had a responsibility to take care of them. However, that didn't mean that on the side, I couldn't find an outlet for creativity and fun and doing something that I'm passionate about. And, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be on the radio. Originally it was one of those things where wanted to be the guy giving the top 10 hits of that week, and
you have a great voice. You have a great voice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. My wife's tired of hearing it most days, but I appreciate it. And then wanting to do radio and wanted to talk radio. And I kind of ended up with a choice where I could either give up everything that I was doing and go to a broadcasting school and do that, or I could just buy a microphone and start pumping it out on the internet.
Start. Yeah.
So here we are. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, are afraid of failure. I think more than anything, they think, well, what if I take this huge risk and I fail? And personally, I feel like, well, then you fail. Well, then you do something else, or you try again. You can take any successful person out there, even the greats that we look at, anybody from, Michael Jordan to, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Success, I've realized, is not a straight path. It rarely is. So many people fail more than they succeed, even the greats. There's nobody who they're born and they come out golden and everything they do the rest of their life is absolutely perfect, and I think I think taking that leap is really important, and having the courage to take that leap can be some of the most transformative things in your life.
Absolutely. With failure, I talk about this in my book too, about failure and perseverance. And I don't really think that I guess I don't really believe in failure, or it needs a new definition or something, I think, because when we don't succeed at something, when we don't get the desired outcome that we wanted, we gain something, we gain some knowledge. So the next time we try that thing, we're going to be better at it. So we're now more equipped to go further, faster, than we were before. So, we're always going to be better the 100th time we tried something versus the first time. And if we were to just jump ahead, like, for example, I wanted to be a writer since I was a little girl, but if I didn't go through all of the experiences and the challenging times, I would not have written this book, because I wouldn't have all of the information, that I learned to put in the book. So that's my take on failure, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I love the way you put that about giving it a new name. You're absolutely right, because that has such a stigma to it. The word failure. Oh, so-and-so is a failure. Oh, so-and-so tried this and they failed. So-and-so tried this and they failed. And I always think, well, at least they tried. At least it was, if it was something they were really passionate about, something they really wanted to do, and they gave it their all and they failed, there's no dishonor in that. There's no need to look down on somebody. Heck, they had the intestinal fortitude and the bravery to do it, where most people don't. So I wish there was. I wish there was another word we could supplant for that, because it has such negative connotations. And I feel like anything that you're going to learn from shouldn't have such negative connotations to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think I've always felt that anytime we're basing our decision on fear, it's a wrong decision. So we need to go the other way, because, like I mentioned before, I think I mentioned this before, but we're the only ones who can hold ourselves back. And often we let fear get in the way and we stop ourselves before we even get started, thinking, way past, just the first step. Well, how am I ever going to get there? How am I ever going to make it happen? Sometimes when I'm sharing my goals with friends, they might say, well, how are you going to do that? I don't worry about how. I just get started. I just listen to what it is I want, and I get curious. Like if I get an idea about something, I kind of sit with it. I get curious about it, and then I get excited, and then the first step comes, and then you take the first step, and then the next step comes. When we're so focused on whether or not we're going to succeed and how we're going to do it, we often don't even get started.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's failure, I think, just not getting started.
Right. Absolutely. And there is a book out there. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
I have not, but I'll look it up.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those books where I find myself several years buying copies of it because it's a book I just love to give to people. And it's not a really long book, but it encapsulates exactly what you're talking about, in the sense that anytime there's something you want to do, like let's say you want to write a novel, let's say you want to write a podcast, let's say you want to go to nursing school, there are going to be all these voices in your head telling you you can't do that. Mm-hmm. And those voices are resistance, and resistance is your enemy to anything that you want to do. Mm-hmm. And I've given out probably dozens of copies of this book to people because I think it is so good. Like once you realize, because you tell yourself like, well, I would love to do that, but how am I going to do how am I going to pay my bills while I do that? I mean, I really could do it, but God, am I really smart enough to do that? All these mm-hmm. things are just, they're just little demons in your ear trying to discourage you from doing it as what you want to do. And you would find that if you just find your own way to press through that, mm-hmm. you're going to end up accomplishing way more than you ever thought you could. I'll send you a link as soon as we're done with this, because it's a book that I absolutely love to give to people.
Okay, great. Yeah, I would love that. I think so. A mindset that I adopted years ago that was given to me by an acquaintance. We weren't even really good friends. Her name is Haley. So shout out to Haley, wherever you are. I don't know her last name. We waited tables briefly together back when I was in Virginia. And this was when I finally decided, okay, I'm moving to New York. I had started my medical sales career, and that, I was unhappy. And then I decided, okay, I'm doing it. I'm moving to New York. So I started applying, and I got my first job interview in New York. So I was really excited, I was going to drive out here. And then I got scared. So it's human nature, the doubt, the fear creeps in. And I happened to run into Haley. We were both in medical sales at that time. And so we ran into each other in the field, and I started telling her about my interview. And then I told her I was scared. I said, what if I don't get it? And she said, why wouldn't you get it? And I just thought, oh my gosh, wow, what an amazing mindset. I could just switch my mindset, and I could just from now on think, what if I do get it? Of course I'll get it. What if it does work out? So I think that's a great trick that anybody can imply whenever that fear, which is human nature, is totally natural, creeps in. We just switch it to, what if it does work out? Yes, it will. Of course it will. So that's how I approach everything that I go after. I mean, when I had my first life coaching call with my first life coaching client, I was scared nervous when I was about to dial, because I thought, what if I don't help him? What if I can't? And then I said, what if you do, Mm-hmm. So, and same thing with my book. I had it pretty much written, and then I started to get scared. What if this is, whatever?
Yeah.
You just switch it and you just keep going, because there's a reason that we're drawn to the things that we're drawn toward.
Right. And you nail it on the head. Like here I am, I told you earlier that I've been doing this podcast for 2.5, 3 years. And so somebody on the outside could say, well, yeah, that's James. He's got a podcast. That's what he does. And yet I go through that resistance on a regular basis as well. I've had times even doing this podcast where, I'll get to a point where I'm like, God, is this something I really want to keep doing? Am I even any good? Are people even actually listening to this? Right. And then inevitably what happens is I'll be scrolling through Twitter or Instagram or something, and I'll come across somebody who's really, really interesting. And I think to myself, that'd be a really cool person to have on the podcast. Right. Man, it'd just be great to have a conversation with that person. Like, I just want to know more about this person, about what it is they do. And it mm-hmm. seems like, as soon as that happens, the flame reignites, and then a couple weeks later, I'm looking back at it. You think like just a couple weeks ago, I was actually thinking about quitting doing this. Why would I ever think about quitting doing this?
I'm glad you didn't.
You know, I mean, it was the same way with you, and it to me, it's fascinating. Every single person on the planet has a story to tell, and every single person on the planet has something interesting to say.
Right.
And that's what, you know, for a while I was really stressed doing this podcast, because when I first started, like my first 4 or 5 episodes were people that I knew in real life. There were people who had been friends of mine for years, and they just came over and we sat down at my kitchen table and talked. And then after that, I started getting really stressed out. Like, how am I going to get guests to be on this podcast? How am I ever going to, like, I know there's literally billions of people on this planet, but how am I ever going to find these people? And it comes to you in the most interesting ways, you know.
Yes,
Laura,
it does. Yeah.
Laura High was on my podcast last, purely because she popped up in my TikTok feed. And she's absolutely hysterical, as I'm sure you well know. Sent her a message. She agreed to come on the podcast. We started following each other on Instagram, you know. So then I start networking out. I start looking, well, who's this person? Amy. And I start watching. I'm like, this person's fascinating. This is great. I got to get in contact with this person. So I always tell people that if you ever feel like you're getting in a rut or you're not getting where it is you think you want to go, keep pushing. Keep pushing. Usually you're a lot closer to breaking through than you actually think you are. That was insanely long-winded, but you get the point.
I do get the point. I absolutely love that. I read a book by Vicki King, because among the many things that I do, I also write, I want to write, do screenwriting, write movies. So I've written 3, and that project is set aside for now, but at some point I'll tackle that again. But Vicki King wrote a book, How to Write a Movie in 21 Days. I'm very process oriented. So give me a process, I'll follow the process, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I'm not, very good at that. But in her book, she talks about how you'll always notice this in the movies right before the main character gets what they want, they give up, and they're often like really, really close, to the solution finding them. So I call it the state the problem and give up concept. So in life, when we're feeling super frustrated, we don't know the answer, we're just unsatisfied or, unhappy with something. I think we can really get where it is we want to go by taking the pressure off and just stating the problem. Okay, the problem is I don't know how I'm going to get people on this podcast. Okay. And then give up, just let the pressure go, give up, get present with something that you do have locked down, that you know how to do. And then the solution usually finds us. I've felt, I do motivational videos, as you've probably seen some of them on my YouTube and Instagram. But, sometimes maybe when I haven't done one in a while, or I'll just feel like, is this stupid? is this helping anybody?
Right.
And then I'll get, a message, an encouraging message from somebody that, they loved it and it really helped them. So.
You're absolutely right. And I've been there too, where I'll, because I don't have a set schedule for episodes for this show. It's just, I kind of just move from, okay, whenever I can erase. So sometimes there will be, a week in between episodes. Sometimes there can be a month or more in between episodes. And, I'll kind of have a gap in there, and I'm sort of like, man, just like I said before, I'm not sure. And then all of a sudden I'll get somebody who I don't even know, who's just a follower of the show, who will just like send me a DM on Instagram and be like, what the hell, man? It's been like 2 months. What's going on?
Oh, nice.
What's going on?
People want to hear from you. Yeah.
And then you sort of feel like, wow, Todd from Georgia needs me to kick it in the ass. I need to get another, Yeah, absolutely. And it's tough because, as we've said over and over and over again, that it's like, it's almost like there's 2 parts of you inside of you, and one of them wants you to fail. And a lot of that is I think that one side of you is attempting to be the overprotective mother, if that makes sense. Oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. You need to stay safe, and you need to stay over here, and you need to just keep doing what you're doing. And that can be, and the other half of that is having the confidence to either do what it is you want to do, or at the very least have the confidence on top of that, that if you do what you want to do and you fail, that you're going to be okay. That it's not going to be the end of the world. And I think, and at least me personally, that was something I struggled with all through my teens and my 20s. I struggled with self-confidence horribly, horribly. And I could get into the long story behind that, and I'm not going to. And then eventually that you sort of realize that, yeah, confidence can be something, I think, excuse me, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on this. I think confidence can be something you're born with. I think a lot of the times it's molded into or out of you, depending upon your life experiences and what it is you go through growing up. But that doesn't mean that if you don't have confidence, that that's not something that you can garner. I definitely think it's something that you can build upon and find if it's something that you're struggling with. How about you? What?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that we can be confident in one area and then not confident in another area. And I definitely think that we all have challenges that we went through when we were younger that shape us as we move forward throughout our lives. And not that we all had horrible parents or anything like that, but I think most of us, if not all of us, had some kind of traumatic or very painful experience when we were younger. And then what happens is we develop these beliefs about ourselves in order to cope with that. Because when we're kids, we don't know how to take care of ourselves. We don't know how to deal with problems. So we deal with them maybe in a way that's not very healthy for us, which is like if we were bullied, maybe as a kid, maybe we develop the mindset that we don't belong. And then we grow up, we go through our lives consistently feeling like, we don't belong. And then what happens is we continue to have experiences that draw us back to that emotion. They're triggering experiences because that mindset needs to be healed. It needs to be switched. So for me growing up, I was popular. I had friends. I was confident in some ways where, like, for example, I would always stand up for myself and speak my mind and maybe stand up for other people. So I kind of didn't care what people thought of me. I was confident in that way. But there was another area that I was very not confident, like seriously lacking self-esteem because of the challenges that I had gone through. So I think that's probably true for most of us. We have some areas where we're not confident, other areas where we are confident. But yeah, we can absolutely change that, by figuring out and uncovering what the real issue is. We can heal it and then have greater self-confidence.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it's just being aware of your comfort zone and being okay with stepping out of your comfort zone is a huge part of that. That's one of the things that I realized several years ago, is that in some ways how scary and yet exhilarating it can be to throw yourself into an area that's outside your comfort zone. 100%. Like just plunge into it and see what happens.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised, because we're all a lot more confident than we think we are. We're all have a lot more ability than we think we do. The only exception I take to that is like ultimate fighting. That's not something I'm going to throw myself into. That's just, I'm
oh my
aware.
gosh, no.
Forget about it. They always say it doesn't hurt to try, but in that one case, I will say that's very much different. Well, this has been great. I do want to ask, so your book, Ready, Set, Recruit, The Hiring Manager's Guide to Recruiting with Confidence, coming out next week?
Yes, coming out next week. I'm aiming for January 26th, Wednesday, to release it, but I might have to push it back just a little bit. I'm just working on wrapping up a couple other things. So, but yeah, that's the plan.
Okay. You want to give folks a quick rundown of your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ready, Set, Recruit, the Hiring Manager's Guide to Recruiting with Confidence. So it is geared toward hiring managers to help them streamline their recruiting process and eliminate some of those unnecessary inefficiencies and challenges. So, sometimes we get to the end of the process and we realize, looking back, we missed these red flags. How did we hired the wrong candidate, or spent all of this time pushing the wrong candidate to the end of the process, and they're not the right fit. So I feel like I have mastered the process, and I want to help. I want to help hiring managers I'm kind of looking at it from an outside perspective, kind of like a bird's eye view, where I can look in and identify, this is an issue, this is an issue. If you just did this a little bit differently, your lives would be much easier. I want to continue helping hiring managers, make their lives easier. However, there's also a lot of tips as far as like life direction, problem solving, listening to our gut instinct, getting curious about our problems or our emotions, why we feel the way we do about certain things, and letting these things guide us toward the right path for us. So it can also help as kind of like a self-help, motivational, inspirational book for anyone. And then there's also some good tips in there for candidates on resumes, interviewing tips, how to tell your story. Is that a good rundown?
Yeah, I like it. So you're like you're the matchmaker. You're like the Hitch of the career world. Yeah, I like it. And where all can folks can get it on Amazon?
Yes, starting with Amazon for now. I'll have ebook, the ebook is going to be very reduced during the first launch week and the couple weeks after, and then I'll have, of course, hardcover and paperback. So just on Amazon for now.
Fantastic. And where all can people follow you at? Those who are interested.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd love to connect with folks who want to talk about the book or life in general, or follow my videos. So I have TikTok, I have Instagram, and I have YouTube. And so those channels are all being Amy Lee Miller. That's maybe cheesy, but that's what it is.
Well, that is fantastic. This has been a great conversation. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come on. I want to say to all the folks out there, how about a round of applause? There we go. They're all clapping as they're listening. I guarantee it. Well, all right, Amy. Well, hey, it was great talking to you. I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
I would love that. Yeah, this has been really fun. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say, wish you nothing but the best of luck.
Thank you. You too. Yeah, it's a great conversation. I appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Well, take care now.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.